In the heart of London, during the twilight years of the 19th century, when gas lamps flickered like dying stars and the fog clung to cobblestones with the persistence of a jealous lover, there lived a man whose name would soon be whispered in the same breath as madness and revelation. Walter John Kilner, a physician by trade and a seeker of the unseen by vocation, stood at the precipice of a discovery that threatened to unravel the very fabric of medical orthodoxy. His instrument was neither scalpel nor stethoscope, but a pair of peculiar glass lenses stained with a solution so obscure that even the apothecaries of Soho could scarcely pronounce its components. These were not ordinary spectacles, they were windows into a realm long dismissed as the province of charlatans and mystics, the human aura. Kilner called them spectacles for the perception of the human atmosphere, but history, ever fond of brevity and mystery, would remember them simply as the Kilner Screens. The story begins not in a laboratory, but in the dimly lit wards of the London hospital, where Kilner, weary from the ceaseless parade of consumptives and syphilitics, began to notice something strange. Certain patients, though clinically diagnosed as terminal, radiated an inexplicable vitality, a faint, shimmering outline that clung to their skin like morning dew on spiderwebs. Others, outwardly robust, seemed cloaked in a dull grayish haze that made Kilner's skin crawl with premonition. At first, he dismissed these visions as ocular fatigue, the hallucinations of a mind strained by sleepless nights and carbolic fumes. But the phenomenon persisted, growing more vivid, more structured, until it could no longer be ignored. It was then that he turned to the work of earlier visionaries, men like Baron Karl von Reichenbach, who spoke of the Odic force, and the Swedish mystic Emanuel Swedenborg, who claimed to see the spiritual effluvia of every soul he encountered. Kilner, however, was no mystic. He was a man of science, and if this atmosphere existed, he reasoned, it must be measurable, observable, and above all, reproducible. Thus began his meticulous experiments in the basement of his home on Harley Street, where he transformed a modest study into a sanctum of optical inquiry. The key to his method lay in a dye known as dicyanin, a deep violet substance originally developed for photographic purposes. Kilner discovered that when this dye was applied to glass plates or incorporated into spectacle lenses, it filtered out certain wavelengths of visible light, thereby heightening the eye's sensitivity to what he termed ultraviolet radiation of biological origin. Through these tinted lenses, the human body ceased to be a mere anatomical construct. It became a luminous entity, surrounded by a corona of shifting colors and densities. Kilner documented everything with the precision of a cartographer mapping uncharted lands. The aura of a healthy young man appeared as a clear, bluish-white nimbus extending several inches from the skin. That of a consumptive patient, by contrast, was thin, fragmented, and tinged with sickly green. Most astonishingly, he claimed to detect pathological changes in the aura weeks, even months, before clinical symptoms manifested. The medical establishment, predictably, recoiled. Kilner's 1911 paper, The Human Atmosphere, published in the Proceedings of the Society for Psychical Research, was met with a mixture of derision and polite silence. Colleagues who had once shared cigars with him in the hospital smoking room now avoided his gaze in corridors. One prominent surgeon declared that Kilner had mistaken the fumes of ether for the breath of God. Yet, Kilner pressed on, undeterred. He trained assistants to use the screens, established protocols for observation under controlled lighting, and even devised a method to photograph the aura using long exposure plates, an endeavor that produced ghostly, ethereal images which, to this day, remain both haunting and ambiguous. His 1920 book, The Human Aura, became a cult object among spiritualists and fringe scientists, though it vanished from mainstream discourse almost as quickly as it appeared. Kilner died in obscurity, his screens gathering dust and forgotten drawers, his name reduced to a footnote in the annals of medical eccentricity. And yet, the Kilner Screens refused to fade entirely. Decades later, in the fevered laboratories of the Cold War, Soviet scientists, ever eager to outmaneuver Western rationalism with esoteric advantage, rediscovered Kilner's work. In secret institutes behind the Iron Curtain, researchers experimented with bioelectrography, Kirlian photography, and spectral analysis, all of which bore uncanny resemblance to Kilner's early observations. They spoke of the bioplasmic field, a term that sounded more scientific but described the same elusive phenomenon, a luminous envelope surrounding living organisms, responsive to emotion, disease, and intention. Even in the West, during the psychedelic renaissance of the 1960s, countercultural figures like Timothy Leary and Aldous Huxley referenced Kilner's aura as evidence of a hidden dimension of consciousness. The screens, though obsolete as instruments, had become symbols of rebellion against materialist dogma, of the perennial human yearning to see beyond the veil of flesh. What makes the Kilner Screens so enduringly fascinating is not merely their purported ability to reveal the aura, but what they represent, the fragile boundary between science and spirituality, between the measurable and the mystical. Modern physics, with its entanglement theories and quantum fields, has begun to echo what Kilner intuited over a century ago, that the human body is not a closed system, but a dynamic node in a vast, invisible web of energy. Thermal imaging, infrared spectroscopy, and even functional MRI scans now capture physiological changes that correlate, in eerie fashion, with Kilner's descriptions of aura alterations in disease. Could it be that he was not deluded, but merely ahead of his time? That his Dicyanin lenses, crude as they were, acted as primitive sensors for biofield emissions we are only now beginning to quantify? Consider the case of Elena Petrova, a Soviet bioenergetics researcher who, in the 1970s, used modified Kilner-type filters to study the auras of Olympic athletes. She reported that champions in peak condition displayed auras of extraordinary coherence, dense, symmetrical, and pulsing with rhythmic regularity, while those suffering from overtraining exhibited chaotic, frayed halos. Her findings, though classified for years, were later corroborated by Western sports scientists using heart rate variability monitors and cortisol assays. Or take the work of Dr. Hiroshi Motoyama in Japan, who spent decades developing the Chakra instrument to measure subtle energy flows. His data, though controversial, aligns strikingly with Kilner's chromatic mappings of emotional states. These are not coincidences, but threads in a larger tapestry, one that Kilner, with his quiet persistence and violet-tinted glasses, began to weave long before the world was ready to see it. Of course, skepticism remains, and rightly so. The aura, if it exists, defies easy measurement. Critics argue that what Kilner observed was nothing more than afterimages, optical illusions, or the psychological projection of expectation. And indeed, without rigorous double-blind protocols, impossible in his era, his conclusions must be viewed with caution. Yet to dismiss him entirely is to ignore the most vital lesson of scientific history, that breakthroughs often emerge from the margins, from those willing to look where others refuse to see. Newton dabbled in alchemy, Tesla spoke to pigeons, Einstein credited his greatest insights to thought experiments that bordered on the fantastical. Visionaries are rarely tidy, they are messy, obsessive, and often ridiculed until the world catches up. The legacy of the Kilner Screens, then, is not merely technical, but philosophical. They challenge us to reconsider the limits of perception, to question whether the instruments we trust, microscopes, spectrometers, gene sequencers, are the only valid windows into reality? What if there are other senses, other filters, other ways of knowing that have been suppressed not because they are false, but because they are inconvenient? In an age of algorithmic certainty and data-driven dogma, Kilner's story is a reminder that mystery still dwells at the edges of human understanding, waiting for those bold enough to don strange glasses and peer into the unknown. Today, replicas of the Kilner Screens can be found in esoteric bookshops and online marketplaces, often sold alongside crystals and tarot decks. Most are cheap imitations, their dyes inaccurate, their claims inflated. But the original spirit of inquiry endures, not in the glass itself, but in the questions it provokes. Can we see the invisible? Can disease be sensed before it strikes? Is there a light within us that reflects our innermost state? These are not merely metaphysical musings, they are invitations to explore, to experiment, to dare. The modern seeker need not replicate Kilner's exact methods. Indeed, better tools now exist, but must inherit his courage, the courage to observe without prejudice, to document without fear, and to believe that reality is far stranger and more beautiful than textbooks admit. So let this be your call, not to don violet spectacles and wander the streets seeking halos, but to cultivate a Kilner-like curiosity in your own life. Read widely, question deeply, and never accept the boundaries others draw around what is possible. Visit laboratories where Biofield research is quietly advancing. Study the history of medical heresies that later became orthodoxy. Learn to see not just with your eyes, but with your mind open to wonder. For in the end, the true Kilner screen is not a piece of dyed glass, but the lens of an awakened imagination, one that dares to perceive the luminous truth hidden just beyond the edge of the visible world. The story of Walter Kilner is not over. It is being rewritten every time someone chooses curiosity over conformity, every time a scientist dares to investigate the anomalous, every time a reader finishes an article like this and feels a spark of restless inquiry. The aura may or may not exist, but the human desire to see beyond the surface, to touch the unseen, is undeniably real, and that, perhaps, is the most radiant field of all.